Welcome to the 9th day of Bookmas on my channel, and today I'm going to talk about my 9 least favorite books of 2018. So I'm not necessarily saying that these are all books that I absolutely hated, but these are the ones out of the 112 books that I read in the year that I didn't really like. And so most of these are rated like 1s and 2s. There is one 3, so I'll start with the one that's a 3, and then like the other ones aren't like in order of the way I didn't like them, but they are 1s and 2s. First of all, I just want to say that this is all my opinion about these books. Some of these books are really popular, so obviously other people do really love them, and that is great. If you enjoy a book, I don't want you to think that I am judging you based on the fact that you like a book and I don't. We just have different tastes. So these are just my least favorite books of the year. So the first one is I Am the Messenger by Markus Zusak. And this is the one I gave 3 stars to, so I didn't absolutely hate it. So this, I'm going to try to be really short on my synopsises on these because there's 9 of them, and also kind of like give really brief the things I didn't like about them. So basically, real quick, this is a book about a main character who starts getting playing cards in his mailbox that tell him to do certain tasks, and he has to complete those, and we are kind of following him on those tasks. And since it's a 3, I'll tell you a few things I did still like. I really liked the main character of Ed. I really liked his friend group. I enjoyed hearing about their relationships. I enjoyed watching him complete the tasks. So I was really actually liking this book for the majority. But what made it one of my least favorite was that I absolutely hated the ending. And sometimes an ending that I don't like isn't going to completely ruin a book for me, but for this one, it did. I can't obviously tell you what the ending was, but for me, it was just completely pretentious, and just, as soon as I read it, I was like, well, now I just really hate this book, even though I had liked it so much. And so that's why I gave it like a middle rating, because I liked it for most of the book. It was only like the last like 30 pages that I really hated, so I kind of balanced it out, because I do think it can be a quality read. So if it might not be an ending you hate. So if you think that you might enjoy the book after you read a full synopsis of it, then go ahead, because it was good for most of it. It was just I personally hated the ending. All right, my next one, and like I said, these aren't necessarily in any order. The next one is Forget You by Jennifer Echols. And this is a YA romance book, and is about a girl who gets in an accident and can't really remember what happens, and then she finds herself in kind of a love triangle between the boy that she likes and the one that she had kind of like a hate relationship. They both dislike each other, but then all of a sudden he's acting like they're together after this accident. So it's like this, she's got to figure out what happened the night of the accident that made this guy suddenly think that they're together, and seems like there's some distance with the guy that she thought that they were headed towards a relationship. And the reason I really didn't like this book was that the main character, her personality was completely inconsistent. Like at the first third of the book, the author was setting her up to be this really intelligent girl that was independent, that hadn't really had a lot of boyfriends or relationships because she was focused on her schoolwork, focused on her swimming, things like that. And then all of a sudden, these 2 boys are in her life, and she becomes this completely vapid, stupid person. And so it just didn't seem consistent. I mean, yes, you can make stupid choices, but like she went from being intelligent and independent to suddenly being like completely dependent on these boys, and like every decision was bad or stupid. And I'm like, this does not seem like the same character. So her character just really bothered me, her inconsistencies. And then the other thing was that the love triangle, I felt really didn't need to be a love triangle, because one of the options was not even a valid option. And that's the thing I hate about love triangles. I don't mind a love triangle trope if both options the person is choosing from, we can be like, oh, I don't know who she's going to choose. I don't know how she's going to end up or whatever. But when one of them is obviously like, you're not going to pick that one, or like a basically write-off, then that's not really a love triangle. That's just like a simple obstacle that you have to get over to be with the other person. So I just didn't like those aspects of it. The next one is The Ugly Duckling by Iris Johansen, and I gave this one 2 stars. I also gave Forget You 2 stars, if I didn't mention that. And Ugly Duckling is like a basic adult romance suspense novel. So it's about a woman who, her husband's in some like shady business, and so she gets kind of like attacked by like a mob kind of figure, and they think she dies, but she survives, so they change the like government entity or whatever that saves her, changes her face, and she goes from being kind of like an average looking housewife to being a really like model beautiful person, and has to like reinvent her life and kind of seeks revenge. So that's the basic plot. And the thing with this one is that I used to love this book. I read this book all the time in high school and college, and it was one of my favorites, and I hadn't read it in a really long time. And then last year I was like, I'm gonna read this book again because it's been like 15 years since I read it. And I really didn't like it. It just felt completely like a cookie cutter plot. Like I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I know that in a lot of romance, you do know what's going to happen, but it's supposed to be a suspenseful romance. There's supposed to be a suspense part. There's supposed to be a little mystery. There's supposed to be like some like moments, and it just was way too predictable and boring. And then the love interest, I know this is like a common thing in romance, but he was so rude and so forceful, and that was seen as sexy by the main character, and that's not sexy to me. And so like it was really bothering me because I'm like, why would you even want to be with this guy? He's just like completely rude and kind of like chauvinistic and blah, and obviously that genre is not my thing anymore. And the next one is A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. I also gave this 2 stars. This is about 2 high schoolers. One of them is a boy who is kind of like more of the like popular crowd and kind of a rebel, and then the girl is like the pastor's daughter, conservative and really very much exemplifies her Christianity, and they kind of end up in like an unlikely friendship. And this is also kind of like a YA romantic book. And you know, Nicholas Sparks, all of his books are like sad as well. And this is another one I had read a long time ago, and I didn't remember it, so I reread it, and I just found it boring. Like, it just, not much happened in the first half of the book, and then the 2 main characters, they went from like basically not having any kind of friendship or anything into like love like so quickly in the middle of the book that I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. There was like no buildup of their relationship, so I felt like it was very fake. And then, you know, like, because Nicholas Sparks wants to make his books sad, which is fine, you know, sometimes it is heartbreaking and like you want that. Since I didn't connect to the characters or connect to their relationship, by the time we got to the sad part, I didn't really care. And I was like, okay, let's just end the book. Luckily it was really short because I just didn't find it that interesting anymore. And then the next book is City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab, and I also gave this 2 stars. And this is a middle grade kind of mystery-ish book about a girl who can talk, she can talk, but she can see, the main thing is she can see ghosts and see into the other world behind the veil or whatever. And so she ventures, her best friend is a ghost, and she ventures into the other world to see like what unfinished business ghosts have and things like that. And it seemed like an amazing premise, and that's why I read it, but it just fell flat for me. Like, the plot was all set up and kind of boring for the majority of the book. Like, it seemed like she was setting up for a series, but not giving enough plot in this one to make me actually want to read the next one. It was all just set up. It was a lot of like telling instead of showing all of the like past that happened and what got us to this point. And then by the time we did get to some plot and some like exciting stuff that was happening, it felt so rushed at the end that I was like, well, now it's over. And I basically had to like force myself to finish this one, even though it was middle grade and it was short. It should have been like a fast read, but it just did not feel fleshed out enough as an actual story to keep my interest. So I would not be continuing with the series, and I just didn't think that she did a good job with a middle grade story. Like, I think she was writing it way too simplified, and that's not what middle grade is. Yes, it is supposed to have more simple language and things so that a middle grader can read it and understand it, but it should still have some excitement and some plot and good characters, and that was not this book. And then the next one, we're moving into some of my 1-star books, is a graphic novel called Kids Are Weird and Other Observations from Parenthood by Jeffrey Brown. And I gave this 1.5 stars. So this is actually more of a compilation of comic strips into one book. And the thing was, I just didn't feel like as a bind-up or as a book, it worked. Like, I felt like these comic strips might have been okay if they were just put on social media like one at a time. But as a thing to read through, it just did not translate the humor. So all these comic strips are basically about like the weird things kids do. And I agree, kids are hilarious. Kids do weird things. As a parent, I know that. But like, have you ever like had a parent try to tell you a story about something funny their kid did and you're like, huh, that didn't really like seem that funny? Because it's only really funny in the moment and in the context of what's happening. But then once you like are away from that context, you're like, oh yeah, sure, that's hilarious. But that's what this whole like bind up was, that it felt way out of context, and like some of them, like maybe like 10 out of all 100 made me actually laugh, but the other ones were like, that might have been funny in the moment, but it's not working so well now that you're later trying to describe it in comic form. So it just did not work for me. Maybe, like I said, it would have worked if it was just one-offs that were put up on social media, like, this is the funny thing my kid said, and then move on. And the next one is Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. I gave this one a 1.5 stars as well. This is a basic kind of like YA paranormal romance with werewolves or shapeshifters or whatever. And I mean, I read this a while ago, so I don't remember exact, but I remember what I didn't like about it was that the romance was very insta-love, and I am not one to like hate insta-love. Like, I'm fine with insta-love if it feels like natural, like it seems like there's actual chemistry, and if the person hasn't just like written off everything else in their life. Just because you suddenly fall in love with somebody or have a connection with somebody does not mean that that person becomes your entire life. And that's what happens in this book. She like automatically falls in love, or they automatically fall in love with each other, and then like all of the friends we learned about, the parents, the school life, everything goes to the wayside, and all we are focused on is this relationship, and she forgets everything else in her life. And I just don't like that at all. So I didn't really like that, and the plot itself was not really that exciting, so I have no reason to continue this series. And then the last two are ones that I have a little more feelings about, and that's why they're on this list. The next one is one that I didn't even rate because I just didn't feel fair rating it, and I'll explain that later, and that is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And this is a middle grade fantasy book that is about a town that every year they sacrifice a baby to the witch that lives in the woods, and the town does that because I think they're afraid of the wrath of what the witch is going to do. Where in reality, and this is like explained even in the like jacket, so it's not a spoiler, is that the witch takes these babies. She doesn't know why this town is just leaving babies, but she knows that every year there's going to be a baby left. She takes the baby to families on the other side of the forest who then like adopt the baby and take it in as their own. And so that was the premise, and I read this book because I'm an adoptive mom, and I thought this would be kind of like an adoption story, and it might be something that like my kids could read later on and be like, oh, I see myself in this fantasy book. But I would not share this book with my children. And the reason I didn't rate it is because I think it is well written. I think it's magical. I think there's good things about it. And so most people would not have a problem, and most kids would not have a problem. But I feel like as somebody involved in adoption and in that kind of world, that I wouldn't want, I don't think that I would want my kids reading it, and I don't think that I would recommend it at all to people who have kids that are adopted, because it did not sit right with me, the whole adoption aspect of it. Even though it's not like the major plot of it, that is the outcome, that these babies are being adopted and they're being sacrificed. And I guess I just didn't realize why the babies were being sacrificed, and as we get into the story, they're not like willingly given, like they are given out of fear. So if you think of that from an adoption point of view, I don't want my children reading about these babies that are being ripped out of their birth parents' arms, basically, forcefully taken and given away. And then these adoptive parents that are given these babies, they have no clue that these babies were forcefully taken. They just are happy to have a baby. And as an adoptive parent, that's my like worst thought ever, is to think that like my children were forcefully taken from their birth parents. And so I had a hard time reading this book from that perspective of like, we even follow the perspective of one of the birth mothers, and it is heartbreaking to see how she is like basically gone crazy because somebody has taken her child away from her without her permission. That's why I didn't rate this book, because I don't think it's necessarily fair to the author, because most people in the world would not have that perspective that read this. But me personally, it was not a good story to be reading as somebody who is an adoptive mom and somebody whose kids are adopted. So that is just my viewpoint of it, of the story. And that's why it was one of my least favorite, because it was hard to read and a struggle. And then my very last one is the only one I still have a copy of, because I just finished it yesterday, or no, 2 days ago. I finished it on the last day of the year, and it is I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh. I gave this 2 stars, and this is a very popular thriller novel, so I'm going to be in the minority here on this one. So at the beginning of the book, in the prologue, we find out that there is a hit-and-run incident where a little boy is killed. And then we are following the perspective of the police force who is investigating the hit and run, and then a woman named Jenna. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because I will talk about this in a recent reads soon, but just basically the things I didn't like is that the first half, it felt like nothing happened. Like the plot was really uninteresting to me. Yeah, it just did not grip me at all for the first half of the book, so it was hard to get through. And then I also found the characters really not interesting. Like I said, we follow the police for half of it, and this detective that we're following, we are learning so much more about his life. And when it's a standalone like this, and we're never going to see this detective again, I don't really need to know a lot about his life. I only need to know what really affects the case, and so it just felt like a ton of information about his life to fill up half of a book, and didn't really have anything to do with the case, and I just didn't really care. I didn't find him that interesting. I didn't find Jenna interesting. And so I was really bored with the characters for the majority of the book. And then the thing with the plot twists, I'm not going to tell you any of the plot twists, but I predicted every single plot twist that was in this book. I know a lot of people don't, and so they find this book good because of the plot twists. But I just felt they were so predictable based on the hints she was giving and like the way it was written. Like from the very beginning, I knew the major one. And then as we started to learn more, I was like, okay, well, this is going to happen. And then it would happen. And it was just too predictable and too ridiculous. Like I was like, this is a ridiculous thing that's going to happen. And it would happen. And I would just be like, oh, I was getting very exasperated. And it was just not for me. I did not find it an enjoyable read. I didn't like the writing, and I didn't like the plot or the characters. So those are my 9 books that I did not like this year. Let me know if you read any of these and your thoughts on it. We can talk some more. I don't mind having a back and forth discussion. I'm not going to like put you down if you like them. Also, if there's books that you really disliked, let me know and I'll see if I read them and like how I felt about them. I hope you are enjoying the new year. Bye!